Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Burning Soul Press presentation. Today's topic is with Julie Novickis, the Impact Manager at Burning Soul Press. And today she's going to be talking about top 5 mistakes new writers make. Julie, I'm excited to hear about this and what kind of mistakes you think writers on their first journey into their first manuscript encounter.
Absolutely. Well, Claire, thank you so much for hopping on with me today. Just to give everyone some context, Claire and I were chatting right before this, and we thought to give this discussion, just more meaning and more conversation, just to kind of do the topic justice. It made more sense for us to share a conversation about kind of our experiences as new writers instead of just me talking at a computer screen for probably 15 minutes. I taught a class yesterday at ISU for the first time in person for a while, and they all just kind of stared at me and they just looked bored. I'm like, this is going to be better if we can have a conversation instead. So Claire, I do appreciate you hopping on. And I don't know that you introduced yourself. So Claire, our success manager with Burning Soul Press. All right. Well, I think I can kind of go ahead and just get us started a little bit. So like Claire mentioned, today's topic, it really comes just from some personal experiences, some personal reflection. For those that don't know me, I am the PR manager, the impact manager with Burning Soul Press. But outside of what I do, I am also a contemporary romance novelist, much like Claire. And I'm fairly new to this type of writing. My background and my education has mostly been focused on more strategic communication and writing with a public relations lens. So I kind of dipped my toe into writing for more of like creative, writing for fiction. And I discovered along the way that I was doing some things very wrong. And so if I had a little bit more time or kind of more in hindsight reflection, there are a few things that I would have wished I would have known before I made these mistakes myself. So for today's purposes, I thought I would share those things with you. Food for thought. Never hurts to just be aware of something new, right?
100%.
Absolutely.
If only we had had someone to tell us these mistakes, it would have saved many drafts and so much time.
100%. Yes. I don't know. Like looking back on it now, you're like, why did I do those things? Those are just so like obvious to me today. But that's after hours and hours and hours spent in various manuscripts. Like I get it now, but it was the first instinct that I had when I sat down and started to write a story for the first time. So hopefully something will kind of strike as inspiration for you if you are interested in listening today. So with that being said, I'm going to click on my little slide here. So just a little background on me in case you're not familiar. So as I mentioned, Impact Manager with Burning Soul Press. I also work with the Writing Champions Project, which is a global writing community. We have a pretty strong presence on Instagram, and we share all kinds of good things about like writing tips and education, surviving the writing journey. So just a small plug there. That's a really cool place to share and kind of learn from other authors. Outside of what I do there, though, I also work in the School of Communication at Illinois State University, and I teach courses mostly in journalism and public relations. And I've got a few books coming out later this year, which is really exciting for me.
Yay.
I know, I can't wait. I feel like it's been a really, really long journey, and I still have months before I get to do anything cool with it. So that's me. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of an insight. In addition to this topic that we have today, I did write a blog on it a couple of months ago. And so I do want to share that just in case anybody is interested in reading just more about this. I'll share that resource at the end of our conversation. Cool. All right. So without further ado, our topic for today is what are the top 5 mistakes new writers make? Now, I will say too that I have 5 things of my own. But Claire, if there's something here that I'm not missing or something that kind of jumps at you, right, as we're having a conversation, definitely add it. And then anybody who's tuned in listening, please feel free to comment as well if there's something else that we can talk more about or something that you want to add to our list of common mistakes.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. The first one, and I put this one first for a reason because it is a strong pet peeve of mine. Writing in passive voice is not what you want to do. And for whatever reason, when I started writing my first novel, it was the first thing that I did. So even though it goes against everything that I teach my students, everything that I tell them not to do is write in passive voice, it was the first thing I did when I started writing this story. So I'm here to tell you, don't do that. It is not in any way what you want to do. When you write in the past tense, you're really taking the reader completely out of the story. You're forcing them to relive things that have already happened rather than letting the reader kind of feel what's happening in the moment. Now, a lot of times students will ask me, well, how do I know if I'm writing in the past tense? And a good indicator is if you have used the word was. That's a pretty strong nudge in the right direction that you can probably revise that sentence in a much stronger way. So use was is kind of like a trigger word. I also tell students of mine that there's a silly little trick that I use personally, and it's my zombie trick. Claire, I don't know if you've heard of this, right?
I've heard of it, and yeah, when you're getting confused with the tense and everything, I've absolutely put the zombie test to use.
Absolutely. So if you're not familiar, right, with the zombie test, if you can structure a sentence and end it with by zombies, you are writing in a passive voice. So like the party was hosted by zombies. That's a grammatically correct sentence, right? But by zombies is your indicator at the end that you have written it passively. So if the sentence makes sense, you know you're doing it wrong. That's
But
my
you could, in your example, just to pipe in, you could, and keeping the zombies in there for a moment, you could make that active and say the zombies hosted the party.
Exactly. There's always a way to like restructure, revise, and to make it so that you are actually like actively participating in the party that the zombies are hosting, right?
Right.
So yes, that is definitely something that I would say was a common mistake that I did, is that you naturally kind of want to say, well, this is what happened. You want to be like the narrator, right, in your story.
Right.
The best thing that you can do is speak in an active tense and let the reader be a part of what's happening rather than having to relive it through the lens of the narrator.
Such a great explanation.
It's just better writing, right? Active writing is better
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
And I think it goes, for creative writing, right? For novel writing, but it's just a staple, right? Writing for a journalistic lens, writing through public relations. I just cringe when I see passive
Right.
writing, and I want to get my red pen out immediately and be like, you have to learn this very quickly. It's hugely important. I'm just taking a quick look at our comments over here. Oh my gosh, you pointed this out for me in my first draft. I can't tell who Facebook user is, but I think it's funny because, right, it's something that once you are kind of naturally attuned to it, you see it everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't see the commenter at the moment.
No, I don't know who Facebook user is, but I think it's funny. I have a critique partner, like a writing partner, and we've been working together for, gosh, I don't know, almost 2 years or so at this point. And I told her about, you write in kind of a passive way, if a good indicator is to just run kind of a control F, right? Just find all the times that you use the word was and just look at them individually. And I think I have given given her a heart attack with how many results come back with the word was, but it's a good place to start for sure. It's Candace. That's okay. So Candace is a friend of mine that I met through the Association for Women in Communication. And I got to share some exchanges with her story that she worked on. And I definitely gave Candace that exact same advice. That's funny. So number one, just to kind of, sum up here, if you're looking to improve your writing and make it stronger, make sure that you are not writing in a passive voice. You want to make sure it is active in nature. Anything else to add, Claire?
Nope. The word was is bad.
You got it. Sum it up. All right. The next thing, dialogue tags, right? So if you're not familiar with what a dialogue tag is, essentially it's giving some kind of tag, right, to what is actively being spoken in your novel. So if I were to say, Julie is presenting, or, like, I'm speaking with Claire, said Julie. Said Julie is the dialogue tag.
Mhm.
Now, an error, right, a common mistake that I made right up front, my head told me that I had to identify who was speaking every single time that there was somebody demonstrating or participating in dialogue. And, you just don't have to do that. That was pointed out to me very early on in a very early draft on my first novel. And my poor critique partner, she wrote back, she's like, you just kind of have some excessive dialogue tags and you just really don't need that. And it took somebody to, like, very gently and kindly, right, point that out to me and say, oh, you're right. It's very obvious who is speaking in this conversation. Why in the world am I trying to include all of these character names? It makes it repetitive. It's extra words that you don't need. And it just kind of trips up the conversation that's happening. So
Right. It slows the reader down.
it absolutely does. Well said. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. It just kind of takes away from the conversation that's taking place.
Right. And one thing that I've noticed, and you can pay attention to the dialogue tags when you're reading. And a lot of times when it is a back and forth conversation between two people, you can, after clarifying who's who, and then it just alternates at that
Mhm.
point, I feel like I've seen so many authors just leave out the tags entirely because it's so obvious who's speaking.
Exactly.
And I mean, for me, because I like to be pretty clear with who's who, I've gone back myself just as a reader and been like, okay, this is so and so and so and so. And that's okay. I would rather do that myself than see John's name and then Jane's name and like pulling me out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's when you do step back and read it, or even have somebody else read it for you, it's one of those things that you don't necessarily recognize right away. But if you just pull them out from the beginning, it's so much easier to kind of break apart that dialogue and kind of figure out who it is that's actually doing the speaking. I've really found that the only place that trips me up a little bit is if you have like two women speaking to each other or two men speaking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Then you kind of have to alternate, right, between their actual character name and then like he said this or she said that. It's a little bit easier when you have a female and a male speaking to each other. It's easier to kind of lay out that dialogue.
Right, because the he and the she.
Yeah.
And what I find too that's okay to do is, so in that example, say you have two females talking to each other, I would put their names,
Mhm.
like Jane said this, and then I don't know, Stacy said this. Then you could go on at that point because the reader knows they're still going to alternate speaking to one another. And you can refresh who's who by just saying Stacy took a sip of her coffee. And instead of writing she said it, you can include Stacy's name by maybe adding a gesture or a body movement, something that he's doing. And that refreshes the reader's idea of who's talking.
Exactly. And it's just like you mentioned, that's a nice subtle way to just kind of give the reader a little reset of, okay, this is the conversation that's taking place. Here's who's doing what, and here's who's speaking those words. So yeah, it's nice and subtle, and it doesn't take away from the actual conversation at play. Another funny thing about dialogue tags, and now I'm really attuned to it. So whenever I read, I feel like I read with this like wildly like critical lens. But it drives me nuts when there is intentional effort to be creative with the actual dialogue tag.
Yes.
9 times out of 10, all you want to do is say, she said.
Yep.
There's so many weird things that I've seen. This is just a simple example because I found it just the other day. Instead of saying like Claire said, it was Claire breathed. Well, breathing and speaking are two very different things, right? So if she's just speaking, tell us she's speaking. And then if you feel compelled, right, to explain that she's breathing as well, that's a separate sentence. It's a separate thought. So when you
Right.
are adding those dialogue tags, right, keep it simple. Your creative mindset and your ability to kind of choose words, there's a different place for that, but it's not meant for the actual dialogue tag. That is simply just a cue for the reader to know who is speaking.
Yeah, there's definitely what about dialogue breaks such as her words ended in a hushed tone giving me chills? I like that description. To me that's much more descriptive than she breathed.
Exactly.
And just because we're both romance writers, like in this example, she whispered, "I love you." She breathed. That's so awkward.
It's so awkward. We know she's breathing. Like, we don't need to expend the words and tell everyone she's also breathing. Well, she's also probably, like moving around a little bit or something like that, like wiggling her toes or something. Like something else is happening that we don't necessarily need to tell the reader.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, any of those descriptors like she yelled is
Right.
it's very elementary to me.
I would definitely agree with that. There might be a moment where you could use a descriptor, like if they're having a screaming match, right? Like you could say she roared or she yelled or hollered or something. Like, but do it once. It's not a repetitive, it's not a consistent thing. Insert it if you need to. If you feel like there's no other way to convey that, go for it. But if you're doing it repeatedly, it's going to trip up the reader as they're kind of going through the story.
Right.
That's a good one. All right. Anything else to add?
Nope.
Is that such a funny one? Like, I wasn't even thinking about it the first time I read, but now as I go through and read with more of a critical lens, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. I need to fix this.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So number 3, show, don't tell. If you have been around anything writing, right, in your entire life, you have heard these words before. But it's also something that is not easy to do on your first go around. It is a practice skill. So what I thought would be helpful, I added some I'll call them trigger words, that if you see these words in your manuscript, chances are you are telling the reader instead of showing the reader what's happening. You're not letting the reader feel. You're not letting the emotions come through.
Mm-hmm.
Felt, realized, and there's that word again, was, right? That one's passive and it's a violator of the show, don't tell rule. So if you feel like you're kind of going through your manuscript and you're realizing that there's some trigger words here, like Julie felt scared, right? Let's use that as an example. Or here I have on the screen, Michael felt scared, right? Well, instead of just telling the reader that Michael is scared, we want to make sure that we're being descriptive in the sense that you're letting the reader feel what scared means. So restructure your sentence, revise what you're doing to really pull out and draw the emotions that come with scared. So what I do, right? I'll sit here and I'll close my eyes for a moment and I think, well, what does my body do when I feel scared, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tense up. I can feel chills all over my skin. Mm-hmm. I can feel like the hair on the back of my neck kind of raise, you're a little bit more heightened. Those are the things that you want to actually describe and put into words. It's just so much stronger, right? Instead of Michael felt scared, again, let the reader feel what scared means.
Right. And to continue on that example, like heart pounding or blood ran cold.
Yeah.
I've seen that one. Hands shaking as she tried to open the door.
Right.
Like those are all descriptors of that's really scary.
100%. Yes. And it's just, it's something so simple. But until you start to recognize where to focus your words and kind of put your energy into writing in that manuscript, you're going to continue to do some of these things, like she felt this way. Well, you're just telling the reader what she feels like. And sure, you might convey what's happening, but you're not doing yourself justice. Like you're doing yourself a disservice as an author by not sharing what those emotions and those impacts are of that emotion.
Right. And this holds true for nonfiction writing. And
Just made me laugh.
touche. The show don't tell holds true in nonfiction writing as well. And I have I think we both took this editing class where this was the advice, but when you're going through editing your manuscript, you can highlight different sections in different colors based on the sense that you were talking about. So if you're focusing on sense of smells throughout your manuscript, you can go through and highlight those in orange.
Yes.
And then if you want to talk about the things that your characters, if you want to focus on the things that your characters are seeing, go through and highlight anything that is site descriptive and highlight that in blue. All of those are ways that you are showing and not telling. And it gives you a visual look at how you're doing that in your manuscript. And it, by using all five senses, like Julie's talking about, it really does draw the reader into your writing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point, Claire. I forgot about that. We did do that like self-editing course together a few months ago. And that's a really good tip. You know, you can self-edit for so many things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as kind of an author, like when you say like, oh, have you edited or something like that? Well, it's kind of like, what type of editing are you doing? Because you could read an entire manuscript just through one lens, right? I'm just looking for my emotional descriptors. Like, that's an entire round of editing.
Right, right.
Yeah. And as you were talking here, I'm going to awkwardly move my camera here for a second so I can pull this out. This is a fantastic writing tool. If you do not have, here, let me figure this out. The Emotion Thesaurus. Do you have one of these?
I have seen that. It's probably sitting in an Amazon wish list in my Amazon account. Since you have it, I'm going to go buy it.
It is. If I don't have this next to me, I'm not going to write well. Like, this is the coolest resource. I think Lauren actually recommended this on some kind of video, some webinar or something like that. I mean, like a year or two ago. And I bought it, of course, because Lauren recommended it. And it's amazing. This is one of the coolest tools that I would absolutely recommend. Here, I'm getting another comment. I love that book. Yes, me too.
Okay. Well, since you and Lauren recommended, I'm going to buy my copy.
Definitely.
Here.
You will not be disappointed. It's called The Emotion Thesaurus, A Writer's Guide to Character Expression. Amazing, amazing resource. And someone else says, I love that book. Okay, anything else with show, don't tell? I feel like we could do an entire session just on this.
I think we could talk for a while on this, yeah.
I think so too. Okay, well, we hit the highlights, I think. All right, number 4. This one comes directly from Stephen King himself. I don't know about you, Claire. I read his memoir, like on the craft of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And this piece just struck me because, again, it was one of those common writing things that I thought I was doing a good thing by using adverbs. Well, turns out that was really dumb, right? That was not what I wanted to do. You need to get rid of your adverbs. They don't help, right? They actually hurt your storytelling and they hurt your writing.
Right. And quick reminder for all of us trying to remember back to our English classes, adverbs are words ending in ly.
Yes, exactly. Right. Things that are enhancing, I'll call it, right, the verb. She opened the door quickly, right? Well, actually, it's probably better if you just say she opened the door instead of describing how she opened the door. Adverbs just tend to weaken your writing. I think that holds true in many forms of writing as well. If I see them for like a press release or if I see them in a feature story, I'm automatically going to cross them off and say, read that sentence again without the adverb. And 9 times out of 10, students are going to recognize it immediately, like, oh, yeah, that actually is a much stronger sentence.
Right, right. Or if you feel strongly that it needs to be in there, then rewrite the sentence in a stronger way. For
sure. I put here on our screen too, just kind of a general rule, right? So think of a traditional, I always go with romance novels, right? They're about what? You call them like 75,000 words, right? Kind of in that, realm. 3. Give yourself 3, right? Out of 75,000 words, allow yourself 3.
Perfect.
It's sometimes a sentence might warrant just a little bit extra description. So if you feel like you have one of three moments that just need an adverb, go for it, right? It's not going to hurt anything by having it in there. I think the problem comes when you have just too many. It just weakens the writing. And I love this quote here in the middle. I think everyone has seen it at this point. I believe the road to hell is paved with adverbs. And after reading through just that one chapter of his memoir, I'm like, yeah, I am not writing well. I have to go back and get rid of so many different things.
Yeah. Control F.
Control F, L-Y.
That search.
Definitely worth revisiting. You can do an entire, review of your manuscript just looking for adverbs. Anything else to add there? I think that one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
it for me.
All right. My last one. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I kind of have a little story that comes with this one where I learned this. So one of my first instincts, right, was to think, if I'm going to write a story, I am telling my reader what my characters are doing. But I learned quickly that it's not actually about what they're doing. It's more about what they're thinking and what they're feeling. Now, I wrote this entire first book terribly, right? I learned all of these lessons doing this wrong the first time. So I submitted my first novel to a publisher directly. And the lady that, received it, she was super kind in the way that she, looked through the whole thing. And she must have given me, I'm not even exaggerating, 20 pages of feedback. But it was critical feedback, right? Like, who does this? Like, agents don't do this. Publishers don't do this. So I was like blown away that this woman actually responded to me and gave me critical feedback about it.
And took the time.
Oh my gosh, she must have spent so much time. I know how many tears I cried after I got that back, right? So she must have really, and ultimately she was like, I have to pass on this because there's too much work to be done, which, all right, I totally own that, right? It was my first attempt. But one of the things she pointed out to me was, why are you taking 3 sentences to describe how somebody is going to the kitchen to get a beer, right? Why are you describing that? Say it. Right? We don't need to know that this person tiptoed across the creaky floor. They entered the kitchen and reached outward and grabbed the handle of the refrigerator. They pulled and opened it. Who cares, right? Like, what are you telling the reader at that point? You're just wasting words. You're wasting time. Instead, right, the focus should be about the thirst that they feel, or how they, desire to have that beverage, and how it feels when it slides down your throat, and how you just feel. It's like the emotional pull, right? What does that beverage do for you? Does it quench a thirst? Does it serve a need, right? It's that makes the story compelling, instead of the actions it takes to go to the refrigerator and get a drink.
I have spent a lot of time myself deleting the play-by-play and actually, the acts of just being in the kitchen and getting something to drink. I've had a lot of that play-by-play myself. And I cringe about it.
Exactly. It's definitely like a second read through, and you're like, why did I take the time? Why did I spend 3 sentences describing how a character moves from one room to another? Like, who cares? Does the setting really change the conversation or the feel of, what's happening? Probably not, right? So why is it so much emphasis on it? So one of the things that I learned from that first terrible experience, right, is just ditch the play-by-play. That's not what makes the story interesting. It's the characters, it's their internal thoughts, and it's their feelings that grip a reader.
Right. And similar to that is, and this may be a little bit more fiction related than nonfiction, but chapters and scenes starting with when a character wakes up and ending when a character goes to bed. Like, it doesn't have to be like from one endpoint to the other. You can end the chapter once the important action or thoughts and emotions are done with. We all know the character is going to go to bed, and we can just move on to the next important scene. And same thing, we can open the scene where the action starts to happen before we go through the play-by-play of our character waking up and getting dressed for the day and all of that. So
It's
that's
really
another one of those.
true. Yeah, that's a really good point too, Claire. 'Cause it's like you naturally want to be able to tell the reader, here's exactly what's happening, right? From the moment you open your eyes to the moment you close them. And in reality, it's like, well, we don't care that they took a 20-minute car ride to get from point A to point B. Like, unless there's something super emotional or something that they're going to realize along that like solo car trip, like it doesn't really need to be in the manuscript.
Right, right.
All good things.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on play-by-play?
Nope.
Okay. Yep. And like I kind of said too, like these are just hitting the highlights. I feel like if I sat down and really thought through this, I could come up with probably 20 more things that I'm like, yeah, I did that wrong the first time. And I kind of wish I would have known about that. Right. But like everything else in life, we learn from the mistakes we make, and writing is no different. And so if there's any takeaway from this conversation, it's the fact that you're probably going to do it wrong the first time. And that's okay. That's part of the writing process. I feel like now I have a different, level of understanding, a stronger appreciation for the words that I can choose to use. Great resources at hand, right, to make my writing stronger. But hey, if I were just sitting down to start this process for the very first time, these are the 5 things that I definitely wish I would have been a little bit more aware of before I started making these mistakes.
Right. And just to add a couple other tips, and 2 mistakes that I personally made when I first started writing was editing as I went.
Oh, yes.
Was such a monumental waste of time. And the second piece was the first draft is supposed to be really crappy. That's why they call it crappy first drafts. And the point of the first draft is to get it all on the page. And I don't think a lot of people know that when they're new to writing. So it's so important. You need to be reminded of it because you do have that urge to self-edit. And the second piece is the next stage after that first draft is you're going to read through it and look at it just to develop the manuscript stronger. You're not going to do line editing, like adding missing periods and commas and whatnot. That stuff's not important. And so it's important to take the right steps at the right time so that you're not wasting time focusing on commas when you're still in that crappy first draft stage.
That is a brilliant piece of advice. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. So much time it's just wasted going back and trying to tweak these tiny little things that, I mean, realistically, right, they're probably going to get cut. That's just how it works in a first draft.
Exactly. In my first book, I wrote, and for everyone, I don't say this enough, I write under the pen name Claire Ripley. In my first book, I wrote it all in third person, and I decided after the first draft was written to go back and change it to first person.
Oh my God.
And I can't tell you how much time I spent doing those Control F searches, and I would still find the word she or he in places. And
Yeah. I've heard several other authors comment on that in the same way of, I got 75% of the way through and I realized that it was a stronger story if I changed how it was told, if I changed the point of view. So
I don't ever want to do that again.
That's true. I guess a piece of advice, right? Know which tense or like which point of view you are most comfortable writing in and stick with it.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's so funny too. Like I don't find that I can write well in first person. Like I probably won't try it. It's just not something that comes natural to me.
Yeah, I don't notice it as much when I read, but as a writer, I tend towards first person.
Wow. Yeah.
It's funny what people tend towards.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know what it is. If I pick up a book that's written in first person, it takes me longer to get into it. Like it's just I don't know. There's something about it. And I obviously after saying that right in the third person, but it's different, you know.
Yeah, and I know this isn't the topic of today, but the first person I feel like the reader is more forgivable for unlikable characters.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Like I think that I feel like bad things and poor decisions can be forgiven by the reader when it's written in first person, because assuming the reader is in that person's shoes.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. It's just you get that more of like that internal, you know, kind of introspective look at who that person is.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's just so many things that I feel like we could just keep going on and on and on about. But this has been a really fun conversation, Claire. I really appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah. This was a blast to talk about. This is our last community live chat here before on topic wise, before we switch over to Circle. So just a quick note, if you haven't already checked out Circle and signed up at the Soul Writer Society, we would love to see all of you there. And I'm sure we're going to be talking more about writing over there on Circle.
Very good. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I am going to throw in the comments here when we're done wrapping up with the live session. I did do a blog piece on this. So if you just want just a tiny bit extra information, I'll just drop that in the comments. Just if you want to look at it, great. If not, no worries. But supplementary, information if that's helpful.
I think it's a great resource. I read it myself. It's a great resource.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Claire. It was nice to see you. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.